to fill in where we are no longer capable of doing things.
Exactly.
Okay?
So these are, I think about the world historically, not just because I'm a historian of ideas, because I think the world functions historically. It changes over time, so that's the idea of history. So the point is, we are not dealing with two inextricable, distinct entities, man and machine, or man and AI, but rather we are dealing with entities that are already exchanging functions.
The lens of words.
Exactly. So the point is, the point in this process is to see how you can see it as again a function, if you pardon me the expression, for humans that suddenly are capable of doing things that were not capable of, 10 days ago or 10 minutes ago. You can see that this average citizen who could hardly remember, whatever he had for breakfast or she had for breakfast, now suddenly is starting and pushing a few buttons and is quoting not Shakespeare, this would be banal, but Anaximandros, You see, fantastic. The problem is that there is almost no trace of that in the next iteration with that human being without the intervention of the machine. There is very little that remains out there as usable,
Look, Sorin, there was a time, well, that time was very recently, when you would write one of these things that are here on the table, a book, and you would have to sit down and you have to go through this process of introspection and research and thought, and what is it that you really want to say, and is it original, and who has had thoughts similar to these, and how they compare to your thoughts, and how does that all work within the context of what you would like to present, and so on. So it was a real brain work to write a book. If you want to now write a book because you want to look cool and look interesting, and hey, I published a book or 2 or 5 or whatever, you don't have to do anything. You go to ChatGPT and let the ChatGPT write the book for you. But here is the diabolic thing in that. Now, some may be saying, well, this is really amazing. We can now use technology to write intelligent and great sounding content, and all we have to do is put our name on it. But these machines are plagiarizing machines, okay? And the problem is that when you used to write books with original thoughts, you actually push the boundary of your research, of what the revelation of the information is that you are building. Now you keep on fishing in already previous stuff.
It's a kind of ars combinatoria, as they used to say in
and what do we serving our narcissistic behavior in society to use these tools to make us look cool or whatever. I mean, look at students, they're using ChatGPT to write essays.
Absolutely. I mentioned the golem before, but I will use another reference to Judaism, of course, the Kabbalah. So, in fact, the AI, the ChatGPT and so forth, these tools are combining whatever there is out there. Pretty much, this would be the dream of those who were writing the Sefer Yetzirot and these traditional books of the Kabbalah and other forms of Jewish mysticism. But under such conditions in which we cannot separate between these two entities, the humans and AI, but rather we are looking at all forms of contaminations, co-evolutions, fusions and disruptions, mutual influences and conditionings and so forth. What is the society we live in, and what is it? What are the social implications of the AI?
But I think we already touched on the social implications, and that is that we are letting AI actually do the thing that we should be doing ourselves, and not let AI aid us in doing these very things.
Absolutely.
And that is to create original thought.
Yes.
That is to be and live humanity. So what actually is AI? This is
a big question.
This is the real big question, you know. And I said this a couple of times before, you know. AI is like God, you know. Everyone talks about it, you know, but nobody knows actually what it is and how it works. So when we, and I said earlier, there is a thing that I call operational transactional processes of artificial intelligence. We don't even need to talk about this stuff because this is cool. It's wonderful, and I think AI companies should heavily focus on building that part, that tool sets that we are having. Some argue obviously that will eradicate a lot of jobs, but guess what? The only reason why anyone today has a job at all is because it hasn't yet eradicated by technology. So we need to, this is very clear, we need to get ready for a world in which no one has a job. A job. That doesn't mean we stop being creative. That doesn't mean we are not doing what we do as best as humans, you know. And that is to exercise this human thought, introspection, creativity, and so on. So let's talk about what other AI there is in the world that may be a problem. So first of all, wherever we use AI beyond just running an industrial component, or a even very sophisticated machine in healthcare, or how we do having tractors without a farmer sitting in it that go and do the work on the field and all these things, you know. There is something beyond that, and that is a part of AI that is quite scary. And the reason for it is that this is highly fragmented. It is AI that serves very specific purposes, very specific agendas, and is designed to be aiding competitiveness amongst society. One with knowledge, it deals also with delivering the content to the human brain that is very questionable.
And also,
and why? Let me just finish. Why is it questionable? It is questionable because I can feed you using AI, creating deepfakes, creating automated content in enormous amounts. I can actually use AI that deals with knowledge management. I can use that to colorize your mind in every way I want. You can be the most liberal person in the world, and you know, within a couple of months, I turn you into a right-wing, I don't know, KKK or Nazi or whatever. It is simply by exposing you, and we know this from cognitive psychology, exposing you enough to floods of AI-generated and delivered content in form of TikTok messages, YouTube shorts, news sites that are faking actually legitimate news sites, all kinds of things.
This is already happening.
It is happening right now, exactly. And so here we are getting into a big problem. because we have special interest groups using these kind of technologies in order to begin to disinform, misinform society to serve their specific purposes. And of course, this has been done since day one.
Yes.
You know, I mean, we had propaganda minister in the Third Reich, you know, you're talking about Germany, you know, where you're originally from. So this is nothing new, okay? We always had that kind of stuff.
Religions of all sorts.
But then it was on a one-on-one basis. Now, a guy that can sit somewhere in a room half around the world on a computer, having access to the internet and maybe some high-powered web servers and whatever have you, can now begin to use that format, that fabric, to unleash waves of polarization that chases. I mean, we know, for example, election interference.
Yeah.
You know, that is real.
Yes.
And we know where it's coming from and who is doing it and where it's being used on and so on. This is a very long discussion. It's way beyond our interview here. But what I want to say here is this. First of all, these types of AI are not intelligent, but they are also transactional.
Yes.
But they are transactional in delivering information packaged in such a way that it becomes influential. No? And we're talking, funny enough, we're talking about influences in the world. You know, if you want to, you know, get something going, you know, you want to call upon influencers, you know, and these influencers using all kinds of very interesting technologies, you know, to facilitate these influences. So, but where we need to get back to, number one, is how do we actually build something that is intelligent? And that means also we need to figure out what actual real intelligence is. Yes. But what is more important is that anything that is being cooked up in any corner of the world in some technology company has now real and serious implications on humanity, on society. And because of that, we need to really think about whether we want an AI that deals with information, not with making robots move this way or that way, or assembly cars, or do all kinds of operational stuff. I'm talking about anything that deals with information. Do we actually want information that has the ability to make societies act in all kinds of ways, including to wage a war, start revolutions, starting to hate each other, or do whatever the special purpose may be? Do we actually want to allow that to move forward? And there are two things that need to happen. Number one, we need to have a system under which all AI can live and interact with each other. That means we need a information standard. That means we need to have a data model that we can use as the foundation of a global AI concept. And number two, we need to build AI models that educate us, not make decisions for us, but give us the opportunity to collaborate as humanity and say, look, what are the 40 things, or 10 things, or 100 things, I don't care how many, most important things that we all on this planet can agree on. We can go and start with something very simple. Do you want to have clean air to breathe every day? Yes, 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 we all agree on. Okay, number one, we can do that. Number one. Number two, do you want to have clean water to drink every day? Yes? Okay, we have two things now we all can agree on this planet. Do you want, and we can all down the list, do you want healthcare, do you want education, do you want your children to be living in safety, and so on. I can come up with 40 things, I guarantee you, that, hold on, let me finish, that every human being on this planet can agree on. So we first need to create a consensual understanding of what are the goals of humanity. Now, the UN tried something with the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. That was kind of a good try in the right direction, but we need to be actually much more thorough and much more tidy about that. Now, then we can go and can say, okay, we want these 40 things, or 50 or 100. Okay, AI, now figure out a way in how everyone on this planet can have these 40 things, at least because some of them are contradict others, in a best possible acceptable compromise. Now that would be a great use of AI, but for that you need to move AI completely out of the hands of special interest groups and needs to move it into a global understanding in which we can understand consequences of decisions. Now that would be an interesting thing. If we actually have AI that will say, okay, well, if I want that, the consequence will be X. And then how does that consequence fit into these 40 or 50 or 100 things that we all as humanity agree on? That is where AI needs to go, desperately, urgently. Because what we actually creating right now is an AI holocaust.
Between two persons that apparently come from two distinct, not opposed, walks of life. A scientist, Hardy Schloer, is present, and myself, Sorin Antohi, a humanist, a historian of ideas. But then the thing is, we met 23 years ago in the splendid city of Avignon, thanks to a friend, a common friend, Mihai Spăriosu, who was trying to dialogue with both sides, with the science side, with the humanist side. Then, of course, we all agreed that there are no sides. We agreed that there is just one encyclopedic form of knowledge we all wanted to achieve. And we will, every one of us in their ways and forms, at their levels, this was what we had in mind. A common worldview. In German, eine Weltanschauung. This is why he's going to be mad because I use German. So the discussion started 23 years ago around notions of global emergencies, global challenges, what technology at its highest level, what science at its highest level, what the humanities at their highest level could contribute together, yes, in order to make, first of all, sense of the world we live in, and if possible, maybe pave the way intellectually towards a different future. We had it all, and in that momentous early fall of autumn, I should say, of 2001, we had agreed on everything, and we wanted to start, yes, something extraordinarily ambitious, which was a center, a global research center, which was the nexus of a global network of centers based in Avignon. And we had the money. We had the money, I mean, the money was promised to us by extremely generous, gigantic benefactors, mostly from the United States. We went home after a very intensive week in Avignon. Well, we went home exactly on 9/11. This meant that all the projects we had went down the drain. Donors thought this was not the absolute emergency of the world, and the world has changed beyond recognition, if you ask me. And thus such enormous idealistic projects became almost impossible. We are still at it, still crisscrossing and still trespassing on each other's field, because we do not believe in the separation of field. We feel there are no frontiers between fields. It is just a dialogue in which everyone contributes their part. I just, also by way of introduction, have to say that that spirit of that encounter 23 years ago in Avignon is very well present in this book, which was written by hardly here present and the late Mihai Spăriosu, and was published in a series with Van de Hoek and Ruprecht that I have the privilege of editing together with, yes, two encyclopedic figures, one from Germany, Jörg Wisen, a philosopher of history, and the other one from Taiwan, Chun-Chie Huang, who is the leading world expert on Confucianism. So if you look, also go through the list of the board members of this series, you will see that most of them are humanists. But that species, I should say, almost extinct, of humanists who are open to sciences and who were interested in what humanism had to say for millennia. A follow-up volume to this was completed by Hardy. I had the privilege of writing an afterword, and it will be available soon. So, this is what I said by means of introduction, by way of introduction, in order to signal that the very topic we are going to discuss more in depth, artificial intelligence, AI, engages us both. Of course, let's say, Hardy will insist on the technological, scientific part of it, but he does so also because he is very interested in what AI can achieve for this world, war against it. So, in fact, we know that AI existed as a concept, one way or another, for about 75 years, if not more. It existed in fiction in all kinds of forms. And this penetrated most science fiction novels, for instance, written after the 1940s, starting from the 1940s. But there are visions of a kind of global intelligence or a global sphere way before, from antiquity to this day. So there's nothing new in the idea. There's something which, of whatever origin, with whichever intentions, may exist out there, that one could already call kind of global kind of mind, or a cosmic spirit, or whatever. This we know came down to us in various traditions in various cultures from antiquity, and they have permeated all the ways in which people think of something external to the human mind, to the individual human mind, that could be located somewhere, maybe in a technology, maybe in a common collective mind of sorts that may exist with or without a technological impulse, or with or without a technological support. So intelligence writ large, and from my point of view, stupidity as well, starting with natural stupidity, which I still consider a danger far larger than artificial intelligence, existed out there. The problem is, it has become a big trend. In this trend, Hardy had already his saying and his contribution to it. My first question to him is this, about this, precisely this trend. So Hardy, what do you think the trend will bring us? Where are we leaving this world somehow? Where do we go with this explosion of the AI presence everywhere around us? In industry, of course, commerce, the environment, in culture, everywhere. Where do you see this trend leading to?
So, first of all, let me reflect on your lengthy introduction on this, about the separation between technology and humanity. Technology is not a goal. Technology should be an aid. The goal should be humanity. The goal should be to create a society in which we can exist, in which we can flourish, in which we are not engaging as we do now in wars and in all kinds of negative behavior, but in which we actually, as a human species, can move forward and flourish. And in that respect, we need to look at any technology, and we need to then understand how this technology affects us, how this technology aids us. And in many cases, we understand that technologies that we have created are very counterproductive. I mean, for example, we invented nuclear fission, and what do? The first thing we do, we drop a couple of huge bombs, in Japan, and kill lots of people. So when we talk about AI, we need to separate about which AI are we actually talking about. So there is what I call operational and transactional AI. And in that area, we're doing a lot of great things. Whether we do them in healthcare, whether we do them in farming, whether we do them in any kind, in finance, in anything that is operational and transactional. No? I mean, today it would be impossible to do some of the things, for example, assemble cars, without having AI. No? Without having actually something that can recognize patterns, draw intelligent conclusions from them, and then follow them, implement them, and so on. So from a perspective, and you mentioned here three things, I think you said industrial or commercial and environmental, yeah, exactly. So in that respect, I think so-called artificial intelligence, although we will have to get during this interview to the point what actually intelligence is and whether that is intelligence, but nevertheless, it is something that aids, that makes things safer, more efficient, and in that respect, especially when applied to business, to commerce, to manufacturing, implement. I mean, we can do heart operations now using AI with automated robots and all kinds of things, you know. And in that respect, we're talking about linear pattern recognition and linear decision making. And we can argue all the way until the cows go home if that is intelligence or not, but it's automation. Yeah. And it's automation of decisions that are being made along the way in order to always choose the best that aligns with the goals that we have set for something. And in that respect, AI is now having, not due to the fact that AI has become so much smaller, but to the fact that we have machines now that can actually process algorithms in an enormous speed and parallelity and capacity. The impact of this operational and transaction AI is tremendous, because now everything that we do will be transformed through this type of AI, this very specific type of AI. And that's been around for a while. I mean, you know, for example, I was mentioning earlier car production, you know, so the robots that are putting cars together, I mean, that exists for a long time already, you know. But now what we learned from that, we are now scaling that into more and more and more aspects of our life. So you can absolutely be sure about that everything that we're doing on this planet will be affected by that type of AI. And this is a good thing.
The point is, as long as AI could be envisaged as a tool, with all the ambiguities of the notion tool, people could pretty much be rather, I would say, well, God, what could a tool do to you? The problem is, this is a very interactive tool, it turns out. It is a tool that already takes part in decision-making processes by insinuating its functions into functions that were in the past and the recent past a monopoly of humans. So it is going everywhere. It acquires a lot of dimensions that were once attributed to a creature made by God, by the devil, by man playing God or devil, the golem, Frankenstein, or things of this sort. So it acquires a kind of will of its own, life of its own, even consciousness of its own. It goes into every detail of this. So for many people, the problem is to be able to distinguish between humans and tools in a world where AI is bringing the two in contact, ever closer contact, and into a form of fusion that, now last time we tried fusion with the nuclear fusion where you mentioned what happened. It is, we are at a kind of historic journey.
Sorin, we already have a fusion, okay? Yeah. And the fusion is that little square thing you got in your pocket, and where everyone walks on the street and only looking in a 30-degree angle down and is engaged in that thing. It has become so much part of us.
Absolutely.
That we're already fusing with all kinds of automations, all kinds of, I mean, our entire information colorization in our conscious thinking is 30-second TikTok messages. Yeah. And I mean, you were holding up this book before, you know that the amount of books actually read by people is in an incredible decline.
Yes.
You know, people are no
longer... I
can
sense this every day.
So by what is this? So this is a feedback loop. And what happens is you are creating through these smartphones, for example, you are creating a convenience. So you don't have to use your brain anymore to do introspection, to have deep thoughts, to compare, to research, to create or acquire context to the content that you are building on in your thought process. All of that is being wiped out. Now there is a horrific study actually that came out of a university from the US, and I looked at it the other day, and they are tracking the average IQ of people long term. And do you understand that with the advent of the internet to be used broadly by people, the IQ has begun to rapidly decline? Well, this is normal. You're not using a muscle. You are using, and this is the problem with AI, you are, and with technology and with information technology and all of it, you actually, this technology has made us dumber.
I'm interested in everything that can help us not actually realize utopia. This is where I am in trouble with utopias. But project, keep up, define and keep up, promote a utopian horizon. People should be somehow supported, helped, educated, trained to, yes, live under a utopian horizon. Never realize utopia, if you ask me, because each time you try, it's a dystopia that comes up.
That's the point.
Yeah, it has been tried.
I'm much more modest in my wishes. I don't even necessarily need utopia, I just want to prevent dystopia.
Absolutely. So, a minimal thing. Then you come to the problem of course, for instance, freeing people from labor, from hard work, from work at all. This is a long-term dream of utopianists, of religions of all sorts and so forth. Then, when you come to defining, the menu of that utopia, you can go in every direction, take up the 10 Commandments or some version of them or whatever other similar paradigm from another religion and try that and so forth. The problem is, the moment you mention the word education, you open the Pandora's box. Yet another one. Because education means different things to different people. A minimal menu for an ideal form of education has been a matter of debate for millennia, with very little agreement, and I would rather notice the extreme lengths to which various educational paradigms have gone. Always moving quite away from the original set of
Sorin, let me interface with what you were saying right now. We're talking here about AI, right?
Yes.
We're talking about how we use AI to help us with understanding, managing information.
Yeah.
So, what about if we redefine education by educating ourselves of the consequences of the things we want?
Yes, that would be a great step forward.
That would be something that AI can really do great things.
To make sure that every idea comes up with a series of footnotes about its consequences. Many people ignore those footnotes or do not care about them. Now, those who do not care about bad consequences, there are many of those, the interest groups that you mentioned, they are fully aware of the bad results of applying a certain number of principles, but this is precisely what they want, or at least they don't care. But if we can concentrate at least only on those who care about the consequences of their actions and thoughts, that is already something extraordinary. I agree. And then you can, let's say, hope to achieve, let's say, a reasonable percentage of the active population of this planet, people who would be aware of consequences, would understand the meaning of their actions and their activities that otherwise can be suggested by programs that have completely different goals, usually the opposite.
Well, I'm neither right, left, up, whatever. I'm just a very pragmatic person. But there is no doubt, and we all know that, and this is not a secret, that certain financial and commercial and geopolitical behavior creates poverty.
No.
And severe poverty, and distressed situations, and war and so on and so forth. Interestingly enough, those individuals that are the most driving forces in that outcome are the ones that like to live in the most affluent neighborhoods of the world. They like to live in very nice villas, in very nice conditions, having, nice transportation, having all the wonderful things. And when they walk out of their door, they are living in these beautiful, manicured neighborhoods, and they feel beautiful and fantastic. Now, if I would just be able to show that person that with a little bit of change in his behavior, he would be the only one to live in that nice condition, we could actually make the whole planet live in a nice condition. And now you are not having to live only in your nice manicured neighborhood, that might be gated to keep all the poverty-stricken people out so they don't come in and rob you. But actually you are now living in a world that's much safer because you're removing the need for economic crime, which is, it's the biggest reason for crime anyway. And you could travel anywhere in the world, and everywhere you would be in a reasonable, nice neighborhood and being with people that are not distressed. How much better would your life be? You wouldn't have to have 10 security guards to worry about, that somebody comes and robs you, and you would actually live in a world in which there is a common level of affluence and so, and it would be so easy to achieve that. So why am I making this long speech about this? Simply because if you actually learn the true long-term, medium-term and scalable effects of the consequences of these things that you are doing, you would adjust them. Because actually information developed through AI could give you a passageway to achieve the horizon of utopia. And while you mentioned the horizon of utopia, I like that term very much. It came from you, and I want to actually steal it and use it in the future.
Yeah, you have to use Émile Cioran.
Okay, good.
Who was making this point against utopias, but in favor of the utopian horizon.
But listen, utopia is only the next thing we have not yet achieved.
Yes.
When we were still walking, then a car was utopia, absolute utopia. Nobody would believe this will ever happen. And when we had the car, or the cart, let's say, and somebody would say, well, we can have an airplane, that was total utopia, And I mean, if I would have told anybody in, let's say, 1970 that we're going to have these smartphones, that can do all of these 1,000 things, that would have been out of the question, utopia. Remember, we had these what was the Starship Enterprise or whatever, where they were talking into these things, and then they were, That was all crazy stuff. Now we all have that, you know. So there's nothing wrong with defining utopia, because defining utopia means it defines goals. And that leads to another very important point I want to make before you take over again. When I look at movies that we made in the 70s, 80s, I mean, there was every week there was a comedy or a romantic comedy or a fun movie or something like this coming out, and then over the 90s and the early 2000s this changed. Now almost every movie is dystopia. Yeah. Every movie is dark. Mad Max is everywhere now. No? I mean, Mad Max was a shocker, you know, back when the first episode was done. Yeah. I don't know how far it goes back, the 80s or something like this. Now, every week there is 5 dystopian movies are coming out, and what happened is that we are colorizing our compass where we are going, and actually the output that we are creating right now is actually what sets the path of where humanity is going.
Absolutely. I will tell you what. I sit on the committee of the Utopian Studies Society, which is a global, it is called also Euro, but this is a global society. And I'm fascinated over the last years by the fact that most young participants in these conferences, they can be 100, 120, 200, things like that, who come from all over the world, who study utopias, but in fact they study dystopias, and 90% at least of what they are reading, and this includes cinema and so forth, but it's mainly about books, about literary, about fiction. It is dystopias. This has gone so far that most of the visions of the future they share when they are asked abruptly, like I tried to do. But what else would you have in mind? If not that, you see, of all these dystopias that are extraordinarily repetitive and, boring as hell, because most of their basic principles have been already exposed from the 1930s, 20s, already from Huxley and Zamyatin, and there's nothing really there. So I said that what else? They come up with things that are quite close in the sense that they are dystopian. And here comes the thing. When you're mentioning, the programming of the AI, the building of the tools, when you are telling something about a kind of ethical and moral code of behavior for those who are actually producing these tools, this is high time for the world to think seriously about it, but I'm sure everybody will just jump and say this is censorship, this is,
Incorrectly so.
I know, of course.
Computer scientists are not in charge of implementing morality and ethics.
Yes.
Computer scientists are simply there to solve a scientific problem. And they should stay that way.
Yes, but the tools they produce are then used by people who are using them on a wide scale. And I'll give you just a trivial example, which is recent, but quite enlightening. The moment when the various AI tools that were being, like Gemini was the case, started to generate totally counterintuitive to me images when prompted to show, for instance, SS soldiers. Then suddenly they had images with black women wearing the SS helmet, or something resembling it very closely, where the black woman who was a pope, or things of this sort. So you can laugh at it, But this was, of course, the result. And I'll come to the...
Operator bias.
Yes. The point is, I come here to this, when I had a discussion with George Stefan here in this series, Ideas in the Agora, in March. I picked up this image from, the iconic image from 2001, A Space Odyssey, from the movie, in which, of course, the computer had, which is somehow suggested to be the main culprit for a kind of impending catastrophe, impending sense of doom. These two people are talking, the humans. Behavior of this machine, which is in contradiction of Isaac Asimov's rules and things like that, in fact turns out to be the result of an instruction that was given to the machine, was unknown to the human cosmonauts, and the instruction was like this: do not tell them anything about the mission, the goal of the mission. They shouldn't know it. And when the machine noticed that these guys were asking themselves questions related to that, and were trying to somehow started guessworking about this topic of the mission, then they started to sabotage them and almost kill them before they reversed the trend. So what I'm saying here is that out there, there are, as we speak, people who are working on, are AI enabled, are using the tools to already program them in such ways that the common users will be doomed to reach a certain kind of result.
Here's a good hook to get right into it, to actually summarize a little bit now about AI. Where are we really?
Yes.
First of all, when it comes to have AI that produces this kind of consequential insight of behavior, AI is right now way overrated.
Yes.
Way overrated, okay? Because we are not anywhere near yet at a type of AI, and I'm getting in a minute what type of AI do we actually need to build.
Yeah.
But we are not anywhere near this, because what we have is we have very linear processes.
So this is not true intelligence. This is not true intelligence.
Not at all.
It's a fantasy.
There is this notion that neural nets, which by the way are not anything we invented now. This is stuff coming out of the 50s and 60s.
Yes,
okay,
absolutely.
and it is the same stuff that we are using today. We're just having a little bit more fancy algorithms now. It's generative AI and all this stuff. And it's nothing other than very linear executional stuff. Yeah. So
this is not about replicating or overcoming the human brain.
No,
replacing.
No. Yeah, but that is what these purveyors of AI all say. Yeah. That a neural net is something that functions like the human brain. The human brain doesn't function at all like that. At all. And maybe we can get into a minute how does a human brain actually really functioning, and it's very, very different than how neural nets work. No? Just because there is this crossover term neurons doesn't mean that these two things are having anything even remotely to do with it.
In one case it is a metaphor rather than a technical word.
So to introduce now a deep thought of how do we build actually AI that really is human. Obviously this interview is way too short, and this is not the forum to get into this, but what we
will continue to talk.
What we clearly need to do is we need to go from linear operating black boxes, and this is the most critical problem of current neural net-based AI is that they are black boxes.
Yes.
Nobody can explain why it came up with a certain result, the machine. okay? Because we cannot look inside that neural net process. It's not possible to understand it, okay? This is already very flawed.
Yes.
There's something that we need to not even accept
Yeah.
as an outcome. So why do we accept
Box
it?
has to be transparent.
Why do we accept
not black.
it? We accept it because, let's take, you know, by the way, I'm mentioning ChatGPT here a few times in this interview. I am not at all criticizing ChatGPT for what it is.
Yeah.
It's great entertainment product,
Yeah.
and to a point, it's a good knowledge product, and it's to a point an interesting creative product. If you can live with that, it creates things only from pre-existing content.
Yes.
Okay, then it's very good, and for that, by the way, it's a nice consumer product. And the nice thing now about them is they are now warning you about that. Okay, the contents that we are giving you, please check it, because you shouldn't, you know, just blindly trust into it. Why not? Because it comes out of a black box.
Yes.
No? And the whole thing really is, to the best definition, it's a plagiarizing machine.
Yeah.
And there's all, I mean, the New York Times, for example, is suing right now OpenAI for taking verbatim whole pieces out of their paper and then reproducing it as answers that people are asking and so on and so forth. But that's not intelligence.
Yes.
Has nothing to do with it. So if we actually want something that we can interact with in a reasonable way, then it needs to have a number of very important prerequisites. One, it needs to be absolutely transparent. Two, it needs to be a global approach to AI, not a fragmented vertical approach, because by having fragmentation, you are creating dangerous blind spots, because you don't know what you don't know. So at least we should be able to use all there is on knowledge in order to understand what the consequential outcomes are, and we ought to understand where the sources are. For example, we shouldn't accept any information that the system gives us, or any recommendation that the system gives us, or any management that the system produces without understanding what are the sources, what is the quality of these sources, what is the legitimacy of these sources, and what is the centric of these sources. For example, are they US-centric, Chinese-centric, Tibetan-centric, philosophic-centric, or you know, some predatory behavior-centric? Are they representing a sub-Saharan African view, or whatever, you know? So we need to understand the centricness in information that is being used. We need to understand the source, and so on and so forth. So we should be able to filter these sources in a way so that we understand the outcomes that we are getting are coinciding with what we actually are looking for as a guidance for our information.
Is the recent attempt by the European Union to legislate on AI getting anywhere near that?
One thing I really like about that new initiative from the European Union,
yes.
something really, really, really great, is that it kind of outrules social profiling. I wrote recently a paper about utopia or dystopia in artificial intelligence, and I'm actually learning there on just how dark and dystopian social profiling is. And yes, AI is fantastic in doing that. No? It can recognize, I mean, it can score and can imprison you. You don't see the walls of the prison, but hey, you are not behaving in an exact way that the state tells you to behave. You don't have access to health care, you can get loans, you can be switched off simply by you being constantly observed and scored and so on. So
that is the perfect dystopia that was already heralded by even...
but we have it already. It's fully operational. And guess what? We continue that way. It is... So obviously there is an East Asian implementation of
China, Singapore.
I don't even want to name. I don't want to start with any name calling or whatever. But trust me, that is also now more and more used everywhere, even in the European Union. Now it's covered. It's you know, in all kinds of ways dressed up, not to appear like. But we have it. We have it. You know, and that's also not new. I mean, a credit score, for example. That we had already, 50, 60 years ago, you know, was nothing other than behavioral profiling that either says, okay, you're worthy of a credit and you are not. It
started with the credit history that was, written on clay tablets.
Exactly. So the point here is that we are in that adaptation of these capabilities. I mean, you have cameras everywhere, you have everything can be, and we have biometrics, so I know who is on the camera and who is jaywalking and who is doing what. So we can now observe them, their behavior with cookies on the internet, you know. Are you looking at this type of news or that type of news? Are you believing into right-wing centric stuff or left-wing centric stuff? How much pornography do you look at? And whatever have you. All of these things are now being obtained. I mean, the amount of cookies, you know, that people now having in their systems. Gazillions. So I can totally profile you whether that social profiling is legal or
if we take the most, let's say, the most usual thing is what Google serves you before you start looking for anything.
Exactly.
You know, that's one.
Or YouTube.
Which is pretty bad. But the worst thing is when Google starts, when you use it as a search engine, and when the results are totally out of the way. But when I say totally, I mean totally. They are bringing up things that you were not looking for, while asking precisely for a specific type. When I have time to add all the specifics, Google finds it somewhere in some forgotten corner of the multiverse. But before I know already what I'm looking for, and I look precisely I give all the indications. If I'm lucky, I'm getting there. To recover, for instance, some papers.
Sorin, this leads to probably one of the central and almost final points on AI I would like to make in this interview today. And that is, and this touches on education, this touches on, are we becoming dumber using AI? Is social profiling, how much of social profiling are we subjected to? Here's the point. The AI that we desperately all need on this planet is, first of all, what I already said earlier. It has to be no black box, it has all of these things. No? But it needs to draw us back into where we are interacting with the machine in a way in where we need to use our brain, in which we need to introspect, in which we need to build actual results, in which we are working with the machine, not have the machine dazzle at us in information randomly or leading us down, to the rabbit hole, but actually AI that helps us to interact and to grow together with the AI, to build actually outcomes that require human interaction and intelligent human interaction, and not where information only goes one way.
In a way, this would be about restoring some basic elements of the human condition.
Yes.
When interacting with what is ultimately a tool and
yes.
should remain a tool. That is, if we go back to our beginning, to this idea that the tool was gaining functions of its own, was acquiring, as it were, a kind of will of its own or conscience of its own, and we have to then pause a little bit and say, well, let us reclaim our humanity in the relationship with AI. That is, we may not get, and maybe we shouldn't even think and dream of a complete, utopian revolution in which we get to singularity, to some form of absolute intelligence that is could not be achieved by the human species by itself, but now it can be by proxy, by using the highest technology, namely AI. Now, is this a way to go? How do you see the restoration of this basic core humanity values, functions, identity dimensions in this?
Very, very importantly, AI needs to fill in where we human are really bad.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, where we really good is reasoning. There is no doubt, and everyone would agree on that the human brain is still the coolest computer on the planet. And that will remain for some time. But the problem with the human brain is that it has a very bad I/O, as we say in computer science, very bad input-output passageway. That means you cannot read 4 billion pieces of documents at the same time, retain all of it, and compare all of it, and then come up with a collective result of it.
We try hard, but it's...
No, you cannot even do this with 2 or 3 documents, you know. You do one at a time, and by the time you see the second one, you already lost some of the context and some of the content of the first one, okay? So, but that doesn't mean that your way of how you use your 5 senses and these these receptors and neurons that you have in your brain, and how you feed sensations into your brain, in how you are working with them. This is a very cool thing, and we can take exactly that and implement it in a machine. I described through quantum relations exactly how that is being done and how that should be done. Huh? So what we really, really need the computer to fill in is to scale that ability of one human brain into billions of parallel brains thinking, being exposed to all information there is, and then use it as defining common societal goals that we have, and understanding the consequences of these goals, and then define out of that specific plans in how to move forward, locally, regionally, globally.
This is the AI utopia. We cannot move any step further than this before we reconvene in June, on the 11th and 12th of June, at the conference, The Challenge of AI, which will be in Bucharest at the World Trade Center, and we'll continue this conversation. Before we break company, I just want to show you, if you look at us, look a little bit beyond us, and you see original frescoes from 300 years ago, which belonged to a monastery that got demolished by Ceausescu in the mid-1980s. And luckily, this museum where we have this conversation, the Museum of the City of Bucharest, collected them, and they were rescued already in 1985. So it's 3 centuries ago that these people were making these pictures behind us. So thank you very much for everybody who listened and watched to us and watched us. And then come back and when we resume the conversation, June 11th and 12th, 2024. Thank you. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.